With Jonathan Major playing the Multiverse Saga's next big bad, many fans are hoping that Kong the Conqueror will pose a great formidable threat at the same level as Thanos had accomplished in the Infinity Saga. Though Kong will be a tough opponent, the MCU also has its fair share of easy supervillains, some rarely having an impact like Whiplash or Justin Hammer. These supervillains turned up to be weak due to either lackluster powers or not being menacing enough to create much damage, not only seen in the MCU but also in the DC universe. From Arcade to Slipknot, these malefactors have done little to annihilate their foes, but some powerless antagonists did show some strength using their intelligence. Whiplash, the genius son of a scientist spurned by Howard Stark, Whiplash decided to create an arc reactor of his own to help take on Howard's son, Tony. Instead of using it as Tony Stark did, Whiplash elected to use his arc reactor to create a pair of whips, leaving audiences everywhere confused about his powers. Considering the effect the arc reactor had on the world at large, the lack of creativity that led to Whiplash inventing a pair of electric whips made the character feel weak. While he was brilliant, and his whips were certainly powerful, it made him one of the worst villains in the Iron Man movies due to the poor execution of his villainous arc and not leaving a large impact. Baron Zemo. There are few villains as brilliant as Baron Zemo. After all, with his wits and determination, he managed to split the Avengers entirely and started the Civil War that was only resolved when Thanos came to destroy half the universe. His clever tricks made him memorable, but they didn't make him powerful. While he's a great leader for the villainous members of the Thunderbolts, he's hardly a powerful figure. Without any hint of superpowers, he's just a man in a mask with a sharp mind. At best, he has connections, and at worst, he's a man who spends most of his time in a jail cell. Arcade is one of Marvel's lesser-known comic villains, in part because it's pretty difficult to adapt him to the big screen. Having no powers, Arcade's main shtick is that he builds murder worlds, which are giant theme parks and contraptions that force heroes to fight each other, often to the death. While his contraptions are fantastic, it isn't as if he's invulnerable to them. After all, Kitty Pryde once dragged him into Murderworld and forced him to face his own inventions. So, while he's certainly brilliant, he's not a villain that's too difficult to stop, and it makes him a pretty weak threat. Lex Luthor set aside money, and Lex Luthor is little more than a man with a grudge, and it certainly shows. While he's one of Superman's best recurring comic villains, he's not exactly the strongest of them, and he hardly matches up to villains like Darkseid and Doomsday. Though he has many clever inventions and an endless horde of goons willing to do anything he tells them, if he was up against a more ruthless hero, he would have been evaporated. Luthor benefits from Superman's weakness from kryptonite, which he can easily come into possession of given his wealth. Crossbones little more than an S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, Crossbones quickly proved himself to be a secret Hydra agent, and one perfectly happy to take on the Avengers. While he has some excellent tech to his name, which helps him take on heroes like Captain America, he's not exactly powerful. After all, Crossbones is just a man with some rudimentary armor and guns. Even if he has the training to help him use them, it's still pretty easy for an experienced agent like Black Widow to take him down. Only his ruthlessness really keeps him in the fight and lets him make the damage he does. Justin Hammer. After failing to team up with Whiplash, military weapons dealer Justin Hammer found himself at a loss for how to deal with Tony Stark. Eventually, the rival arms developer elected to attack Tony with drones, which accomplished nothing at all, and ended up earning him a one-way trip to prison. As a regular person trying to get one over on a superhero, not only was Justin Hammer utterly without powers, but he was also incredibly arrogant in the process. After failing to recruit Whiplash, he would have been better off pausing his plans and continuing again later. Instead, he proved he was as smug as he was foolish, which makes him pretty weak. Calendar Man is a pretty ridiculous concept, all in all. A villain who only strikes on holidays and specific days of the year. His attacks are pretty easy to prepare for, and the pattern is too distinctive to let him avoid capture. Though he's sometimes intimidating as a crime boss, it's hard to take the concept seriously. After all, Calendar Man is just a man who happens to be obsessed with calendars. He doesn't generally have powers, and he doesn't really have a theme that's as terrifying as the Joker's. Calendar Man is a regular person, which certainly makes him one of the weakest DC villains. Slipknot. There's something to be said for having the ability to climb anything. What has to be said is that it isn't a great power, and it certainly didn't help Slipknot in Suicide Squad. The weakest member of the Suicide Squad, Slipknot proved he wasn't actually capable of doing much to serve the team. After all, Slipknot lost his head only a few minutes into the mission, despite thinking he had the ability to escape anything. The team hardly even suffered from his absence, thanks to the fact that his power wasn't really suited for taking on a goddess. All in all, Slipknot just couldn't contribute much. Kite Man. The villain that quickly became the joke of Harley Quinn. Kite Man is exactly what the name describes, a regular man with a giant kite strapped to his back. Fortunately, it's a kite that can collapse at will, making it easily maneuverable when he's trying to glide. Overall, there's not actually much Kite Man can do. While he can fly, he can't really get far. While he can fight, the kite on his back can get in the way. While Kite Man has earned the chance to lead his own spin-off show, he hasn't proven he's capable of actually taking on major threats. Captain Boomerang. Hardly one of the most intimidating villains, Captain Boomerang is just a man with a boomerang. He doesn't have special powers, an intimidating motif, or even a clever alias like Harley Quinn or Killer Croc. Instead, he's just a man with a boomerang, and that's not likely to scare heroes. In a universe with heroes like Wonder Woman, Superman, and The Flash, it's hard to take Captain Boomerang seriously, especially when he's running around trying to take out a goddess. By far the weakest villain, Captain Boomerang just can't accomplish much.
My heart returns to you.